Please have your seats. Welcome to this afternoon's pre-meeting. First order of business would be to ascertain if any Board of Commissioners would like to discuss any of the agenda items for this evening.
Yes, I have one. It's number, I think it's 26, Resolution 2022-244,
And your question?
pertaining to the Clayton County Library System. We received an email this week from the chair of that library board wanting to know, was this process, do we have the authority to do this, to handle this process this way?
Ms. Stanford.
Yes, Commissioner. So Chair Don sent information to the board with regard to wanting to ensure that the Library Board of Trustees is vetted with any process, whether or not it has a policy implication or a programming implication to the Library Board of Trustees. So her request simply is that she was unaware of it, or the board was unaware of it on the front end, and would ask that the board pull that until such time she can have that opportunity vetted with the interim director, and then they look to bring that back forth after they have a discussion with the library board.
Okay, so have they had a discussion with it? Are they okay with moving forward with this?
No, I think their goal is to sit down and have a larger conversation with the interim director and then bring it back at a later date.
So if I just could just pull it for the regular agenda.
Yes,
That's
yes, ma'am.
fine.
Okay,
That's what the request is, yes.
Thank you.
all right.
Any others?
Yes, number 29. Resolution 247, indigent burial.
Paupers, graves.
Yes.
Your question?
Well, I would like for someone from staff to explain it. I received a call on last week from one of the funeral homes because they had a body and didn't have anywhere to put the body. And we're afraid that, and I didn't know this, that the body would turn into liquid?
You said what now?
That the
It's
body
turned
would
to
turn to liquid.
liquefied.
Liquid. Oh,
Right, but luckily we, you made a face, Chief. Is that what happened?
It can, yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that was new to me. But
And
anyway, Chief Roberts, I got in touch with him, and he did work that out with the funeral home director.
And we worked it out together, Commissioner Hambrick, because you took care of that end, I took care of the end with the Wardens group, and they immediately dug some holes in which to place the bodies. So they're caught up to, because there were multiple, and they caught up to those that had been deceased for a little while.
So, okay, so my question on this is, so what do we come up with? What will we do now when we get people that you can't find relatives and all, and the bodies are just laying someplace?
So if you would, yes, just give us the spirit of the resolution.
Right.
Yes, Commissioner, yes, Chair. Essentially what this resolution does, which is Resolution 22-247, is that it replaces the current code, whereas Madam Vice Chair has already pointed out, leaves ambiguous at best what is to happen to unclaimed bodies. Now, in the cases where no next of kin can be located, the medical examiner's office is to provide for safe storage in the morgue. However, they'll promptly arrange for a funeral home to take custody of the remains for a proper burial once the next of kin have been notified. The medical examiner's office shall hold the body at no cost for more than 2 days after the estate. After the second day, then a charge accrues until the 15th day. After 15 days, they're declared unclaimed remains as provided for within the rest of the article. And basically what that means is that this new article allows for the medical examiner to run an advertisement in the legal organ for 2 weeks to tell people that we have this body of this person, individual, if anyone wants to come claim it. After 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks is after the 15 days.
Yes, ma'am. They store it for 15 days.
Okay.
And they'll store it for two more weeks while they run an advertisement in the article. So at that point, it's a month. Well, the better part of. After that, and they'll continue to charge the daily storage fee. If after 2 weeks no one has claimed the remains, the examiner or the designee shall cause the remains to be cremated. The cremated remains shall be safely stored at the office of the medical examiner for 12 months. After 12 months, the cremated remains shall be interred at the discretion of the medical examiner or the designee. So essentially, to back up again, they keep it for 15 days. Nobody's claimed it 15 days. They run an advertisement for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, no one's claimed it. It's cremated. It's held for a year. The remains are held for a year. If the ashes have not been claimed within a year, then they are interred in what would amount to a pauper's grave.
So who's charged?
Eventually, if anybody comes to claim it, then the person claiming the remains shall be charged for any fees that are assessed, including the cremation fee, as well as the previous storage fee.
Okay.
If no one is charged, then
Falls on
No one?
the county just eats it, for lack of a better term.
Okay, now, we still haven't touched on the problem that the funeral director had. There was no place to put the body.
Yes, ma'am. Well, in this particular case, under the old, as it stands right now, because it was unclaimed, there was nothing that they could do with it. If it remains unclaimed, now they can transfer it over to the, if it remains unclaimed, they can run the advertisement for 2 weeks if no one comes to claim it. For example, if someone had a body that was in that state right now, after it was passed tonight, a clock would start running for 15 days. After that, if no one came to pick it up, which we wouldn't imagine anyone would, they would run an advertisement for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, no one came to pick it up, they would be able to cremate the liquefying body. And then at that point, they would have ashes to store as opposed to a decomposing large biological mass, for lack of a better term. And then at that point, after a year, they will be able to inter it into a pauper's vault.
Okay, now, from the call I received, I'm assuming that at some point the funeral home delivers the body to somebody in the county, and everything was full. That was the problem. There was no place to take no refrigeration for
Yes,
that
ma'am.
body.
Now,
So does this cover that?
Now, if you're talking about the funeral home director that contacted you, if it's the same one that's contacted me, DFAX did not contact, I think it was DFAX who didn't contact the refuge control to be able to pick the body up. But to your point, it still had to be stored somewhere.
Well, right, and everything was full, everywhere. And I believe the police department had just gotten a new refrigerator or something for bodies, is that correct?
Well, correct me, I think with the adage of this ordinance or the modification of it, I don't think we'll run into that problem again, but Mr. Stanford.
So Commissioner, your point is well taken. So we were on a call ironically today talking about the medical examiner and going through that process with Chief Roberts and Director Byers and Director Hopkins and a multitude of other people just to talk through that process. What we're dealing with is a lack of storage. So the deal here is now we're trying to get a refrigerant in space. We're trying to ensure that we build out that space as well with some of the ARPA money. But right now, we're trying to figure out how do we handle the number of bodies that might be coming in and have the appropriate storage. So this ordinance will certainly play a huge role once we got to a point of having storage in place. But right now, we're trying to work out a mechanism in place to make that work. So one of the recommendations might be on the front end, do we have an opportunity to potentially contract with some of the funeral directors and some of those other areas until such time we can get someone in space? But we haven't procured the equipment yet in order to take on the responsibility of having an appropriate storage space for some of these burials that clearly has been kind of problematic for us. But the goal of legal was to ensure that any ambiguity in the ordinance itself, it cleared it up when we do have an opportunity to have the storage in place with either a third-party vendor or we have the storage on county property.
So do we have a timeline to work on some stuff? Because I can just see, winter's coming, more flu, COVID, and other things are happening. So I can see us having more bodies.
Yeah, we need to probably come up with a stopgap measure as it pertains to
Right.
the refrigerant. But the bigger, what we left the call on today was, one, there's a larger scope of work that will be developed so that we can get it to Central to do the procurement of a contractor to get in place to handle with the medical examiner space to include the storage. But yeah, we probably will need to come up with a stopgap measure until such time we actually have the refrigerant in the space.
So is that in the next next 2 weeks, next 30 days, next 60
I,
days?
I can have a larger conversation with Chief in that committee.
Yeah.
Commissioner, we can give you a
Okay.
more founded
If
answer
we could do
tomorrow.
that, yeah, I was a
Yes,
little
ma'am.
embarrassed, you know, that, anyway,
Yeah,
I hope we
gotcha.
can do that.
And what I would like to know, and you can email it to, I guess, to all the board members, is how many storage spaces do we have?
Yeah. that's what I
And
was gonna ask you.
what's the, how many are occupied in those
Yeah,
spaces
right
today?
now.
Understood. No problem. I can get that to the
I have a
board.
question too. You said you were gonna ask the funeral homes if they had storage space as well?
Yeah, we can look at a third-party vendor to see whether or not, until such time, if we have overcapacity in certain locations,
Okay.
was there anyone else that we can contract with in the interim? Director Byers did come up with some other options with storage containers and things that we can do, but I don't know how quickly that will be in procurement.
I got somewhere you can store them, but I'm gonna let that go.
I got
Right
it.
there in my district. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Any others? All right, well, let's go to Ms. Merritt and her quarterly report.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Thanks. So this is going to be fairly short because we haven't quite come into the revenue season yet. So this is a look at all of our revenues to date as of September 30th. We've got brought in a total of $19,991,000. That's about 7.6% of the overall budget so far. We should see the property taxes really take an increase sometime in the next few months. So by the time you see this report again, you'll see a good bit more coming in there. So we've had, basically everything's kind of running where it was last year. We've had a little bit of increase in fines and forfeitures, a little bit increase in contributions, and then our other revenues is a little bit ahead of schedule as well. The next few slides here probably are not going to show much until we get to the next quarterly report. This is our prior year to date revenues versus our actual budgeted amounts. So, and then we've got the real and personal property tax revenues. We've got our actuals coming in on real property of almost $304,000, and personal properties coming in at almost $112,000. Sales tax revenue. We've got actuals of $7.48 million. Compared to last year, we've got about $830,000 above last year, so that's really good with our sales tax revenue. And we've got our expenditures here. We're at $50,626,000. That's about 19%, so that's a little bit below what we've budgeted, so that's actually really good. Everything is a little bit below what we should see, so moving towards next quarter, we're doing pretty good there. And we've got a visual of what the expenditures look like by category. And this gives you an idea of what our fund balance was at the beginning. Our overall revenues have been, our expenditures, got our revenues are at 7.9%, expenditures are at 19.1%, and our ending fund balance for September 30th was $83 million. Our ending fund balance for today is $90 million. So we should start seeing these numbers flip-flop a little bit starting the next quarter.
You're showing 83 million and not 90, you said 90.
That was as of September 30th. We've got 90.3 as of today. So,
Any questions for Ms. Merritt?
Yes, and maybe I missed it in the first slide, but where are we with our SPLOST account?
SPLOST.
And this may not be for you, this may be for someone over there, but, when we were putting money in taking money from different places for that, fuel, what's that? The fuel- No,
No,
the
for
fuel,
fuel
station. Right. And I noticed it had, SPOS, I think it was '09 SPOS.
Yes, ma'am.
So how far back do we go with the different SPOS that we have? Is that the,
2004 is our first one.
okay, so have we spent all the money for 2004 or?
2004 is still open.
Okay. So we could not have gotten money from that one to do the fuel station?
So the fueling station was part of the '09 program.
Okay.
And so we are only utilizing funding from whatever the respective program is to cover said expenses. So when we close out projects within the respective program year, we try to use the balance of that funding to cover any underspent projects or overspent projects to take on that responsibility. So the fueling station was part of the '09 program, hence is why those areas, or those program areas for '09, we try to ensure that we pull money from that program year opposed to, you can't intermingle the funds. So we couldn't pull funds from the '04 or the '15 or the '21 program to support the fueling station because it was part of the '09 program.
So how long do we have to spend a SPOS in a given year?
SPOS language gets into a couple of things. Theoretically, you only have a certain time for collection,
Right.
but it doesn't have an expiration date as to
Or
the build out.
suspended. Okay,
Right.
great.
Any other questions? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your update.
Thank you.
There being nothing further, we stand adjourned till 6:30.